Only people are people.
Corporations are not people.
Corporations are not people.
And we're going to work together
And we're going to work together
to reclaim our democracy
to reclaim our democracy
and balance corporate power
and balance corporate power
with people power.
with people power.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you first of all for coming, and just to let you know, coming to a meeting like this is always the most important step. You know, that step out of your door here, that's when you start making the difference, right? Because you can find 1,000,001 excuses not to do something, but when you decide to do something, that's when the power begins. So, my name is Sam Masal, and I'm the Associate Director here at Common Cause New York. Susan, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Susan Lerner, and I'm the Executive Director of Common Cause New York. And just a little background, Common Cause is one unified organization across the country. We were founded slightly more than 40 years ago by John Gardner, whose insight was that everybody is organized in the halls of power but the people, and that there needed to be an organization that would lobby on behalf of ordinary folks. And right now we have a presence in 36 states and paid staff in 22.
You know, in this process about trying to reclaim our democracy, we kept on coming across this issue that when we're working with OWS and other groups, that they needed more information. And there was a real hunger in the communities and with people who want, such as yourself, who want to get active. How do we understand this issue better so that we can talk about this to others? How do we educate ourselves to become better, more effective advocates on helping limit and taking corporate money's influence on the political process? So we kept on talking to folks about this, and this issue kept on coming up again and again. When we worked with OWS, they kept on saying to us, well, you know, we agree with you 100% on, you know, we need to work on this issue. This is the greatest evil that we see, but we need to talk more intelligently about it. We need to kind of have more teach-ins. We need to start providing more information to other people about this. Can you help us? Now, the reality is that Common Cause New York is a small is an organization with, you know, we finite amount of, you know, resources. So we thought to ourselves, what's the best way that we can engage the communities? And how can we best engage it in a way that really reflects the diversity and strength of New York? And in that, we came up with this idea of reaching out to advocates such as yourselves to start helping us do teach-ins, for lack of a better word. And we figured the best way to do this would be to do a boot camp to help you to become well-versed, comfortable talking about this issue, so that you in your own words can take this out into the communities, take this out to your own groups, whether it's a faith group, whether it's a park group, whether it's an OWS group, or school group. Whatever the case is, you can feel comfortable talking about this issue. And then we together, you know, we at Common Cause and you can together work on getting the word out there, because we need to educate our people. We need to educate our city, we need to educate our state, we need to educate our nation that this is a real problem and that it's a solvable problem. We need to rekindle hope. And the only way that you're going to do that is by talking to people in your own language. So Shirley, I want you to go, at the end of this, feel comfortable enough that you can talk about this, you know? That you can talk to your friends, your neighbors, your family, that you can talk to your union members, your, you know, whoever. You can talk to them about this issue, engage them in this dialogue, in this conversation, because when you start having this conversation with people, you start finding that they begin to ask the awkward questions. Why is that so? What can we do? How can we fix it? And that's where we step in, right? Because together, we're going to start reclaiming our democracy. We're going to be working towards a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. We're going to be working on campaign finance reform in the short term here in New York. And we're going to do this together. We're going to work on this. And if you don't know something, you're going to call me. And you're going to be like, hey, Sam, I need information for this group. And we're going to provide it to you. Because from now on, we're in this together. That's why we held hands at the beginning. Because from this moment on, it's not them and us. It's not Common Cause and you. It's us. It's an us process. And in that us process, we are now going to serve as a resource, as an asset, as a tool for you to better educate your people on this issue. And that's where we're coming from. So when dealing with OWS, we, you know, again, some of their leaders kept on coming, well, not leaders, members, some of their
Activists.
members.
They're activists.
I still think in hierarchy, so some of the representatives of OWS that I have met, okay? That's a better way to say it, sorry. And I know you're one, Grace, because I now remember the name. So
I don't know what words to use either. So.
exactly, it's tricky, because I still think in hierarchy. We thought it would be great to start developing and training folks, such as yourselves, to go to Union Square, to go to Federal Reserve now, and other areas, and start talking to them about this issue. Because one of the challenges that we have been told OWS is facing is that we need to shift the anger away from the police back to where it was. It's not Occupy the NYPD, it's Occupy Wall Street for a reason. So we want to reclaim that dialogue with them. So we thought by providing a regular presence in Union Square, a regular presence wherever OWS is, wherever they feel they need someone who's well-versed and articulate on the issue, who can serve as a knowledge base for them, we want to be able to step into in that role and help them out. And that's where you guys step in, and that's why we're here today to do that. So I'm hoping that together we can start talking about corporate personhood, we can start talking about money in politics and how we can reclaim our democracy in this process. And it's a conversation. So as we talk today and for the next couple of hours on this, I want us to very much think about how does this best work for you? How do you make it into Michael's way of doing things? You know, how do what we have work best for you? And how do we move this forward? Because I want us to come up together. We're a team now. And that's basically why I've asked, you know, we're hoping to get from here today.
I have a question. How do you get people, I feel very comfortable talking about politics in this situation today, but how do you get my neighbors, some of my friends, really interested in what's going on and trying to get them to help make changes in this country?
We're gonna, later on, we're gonna kind of circle
Exactly
back to
what we're
some of
gonna
this. We're gonna
talk
address
about.
specifically that.
Okay.
But, and again, the thinking here was very much to have you do direct one-on-ones, you know, and then because money, we see this as almost the root problem that we're trying to address here. So we're trying to address, so you can almost link any problem that your friends or family is having, you can almost link it back to this. And that's the way to go. So whether it's a one-on-one or it's a group conversation, by the end of this, we're hoping that you'll feel comfortable enough to start looping that conversation back and then being informed and comfortable enough in this conversation that you can do that. Because we can win this person by person and we can win this by groups. So,
And this year is an election year. We're gonna have so many opportunities. If we're looking for opportunities to insert this into conversations in a lot of different ways, we're gonna have many opportunities. People are gonna be aware of it, there are gonna be casual comments which are made, something somebody says at a checkout line or something that gives you an opportunity, if you're looking for it, to actually say, well, you know, there actually is a different way to do this, or we could do something about it. And that's very specifically what we're hoping to talk about today, and talk about some of the experiences you've had in the past where you haven't been able to turn the conversation in the way you've wanted to, and give you some suggestions for opening gambits, for arguments, for ways to tease the conversation in a productive direction, because we're very much about, we've done a really great job, and OWS has, and organizations like Common Cause have invested a lot of effort in the last 10 years in convincing people there is a problem. People now understand there is a problem. Reporters now talk about the connection between campaign donations and legislation or public policy. What we haven't done, and what this is all about now, is that we need to take the next step in public education. And now that we've got people concerned and frustrated, now we need to show them there's a better alternative. It's workable. It can be adopted if we get behind it and demand that the changes are made, that they actually work the way we say they're going to work, to point to examples where we have systems that are making a difference in our election campaigns, and turn the conversation from frustration to we can change it, we can make it better.
and I just want to add to this before we move on, to say that we have, you know, we're going just beyond the conversation too. We have action steps, right? And so we're going to end this session today with clear action steps that each of us is going to be able to do the minute we step out. Something concrete that you can do to start affecting this process. And as we move forward together, we're going to continually come up with new things to do, whether it's a petition or promoting a particular thing or making phone banking an elected official for a particular policy. So this is the beginning of a process where we're going to start affecting that change. So it's not just about talking about it, but it's also coming up with action steps, because you know, you can't just talk the talk, you got to walk the walk.
Yeah. I'm Chelsea and I'm from Common Cause. I actually, in undergrad, was looking for organizations doing good policy and good political work, and the title just struck me, Common Cause, because at the root of all of it, I feel that people essentially want the same things. We want to live in safe neighborhoods. We want to have people represent us with genuine perspectives and goals, and so when I saw Common Cause, I felt that that was the work that was being done here. So now I intern here, and I'm very excited. Years later, I can be here.
I want to help make a change in this country. I really feel it, in my guts. So that's why I'm here. And I like the fact that Common Cause, I belong to other political organizations, but I like Common Cause because it is nonpartisan. And I think because it is, that you could get more done that way, because it is nonpartisan. So that's why I'm here.
I'm Allison Tupper, and I work with ACT NOW and the West Side Neighborhood Alliance, and I've been West Side Neighborhood Alliance has been receptive to my talk about campaign finance reform, and ACT NOW has only sort of been. I'm trying to get them to go to town on it. They really, it's a grassroots, it's a progressive PAC that turns out volunteers for elections, and we send busloads here and we go canvassing and we do phone banks. But I haven't been able to get them to stay on just an issue so far. I'm still working on it.
And I'm particularly excited about this group because I've taken part in some focus group discussions as an observer. And what we found in listening to people talk about how they made a determination of who to vote for or what issues were important to them, what we found is the vast majority of people don't pay daily attention to politics. But they have someone in their family or their circle of friends whom they know, like Sandy says, that's what they read about. They live and breathe politics. And when they want to know, should I trust this particular senator? Do I want to vote for this guy for president? They call that person. So rather than trying to always have the resources to do TV advertising or mailers that go to millions of people, we realize that if we can work with activists who are that person for their family and friends, then when you tap that one activist in a circle, you're going to influence 10 to 20 people. You're going to do it in a people-centered way rather than a media-centered way. And so we've started to look at how, once again, to activate the grassroots and find the people who are those political influencers for their family and friends.
I'm Eleanor Moretta. I'm a longtime volunteer with Common Cause, going back to the early 90s. And I guess we both got fed up at the same time. And recent years I've been on the board, so I've been involved in a lot of the things that Common Cause has done specifically. And I'm really excited about the kind of visibility the organization has now compared to the past and what we've been able to accomplish. I mean, I think we're a powerful organization. I think we should all have confidence in the efforts that we're putting on now.
It's true.
Yeah, because I think we're really moving ahead, and of course this group will push us even further along. And I got your email.
Yes, so did I. I got an email from Common Cause.
I'm Reed Perkins, and I got involved after years of sitting around in frustration, talking about politics, complaining about things, but never really taking a step to impact it in any way. And then this spring, I was notified about Resolution Week through Public Citizen, and sort of this grassroots movement to get city councils passing resolutions, calling for an amendment to overturn Citizens United, and in turn that got me involved with Move to Amend, which has a little broader focus on sort of redefining people as people and not corporate entities. So we've recently affiliated as the New York City chapter of Move to Amend, and I work on that with my friend Justin. And Mike's been to our meetings before, so we're trying to figure out how we can move things up from the city council level, because in New York City they've already passed that resolution, to now impact things at the state level. And there's some interesting things happening and moving through right now in both the Senate and the Assembly. So we wanted to come today and just make sure we can get on the same page with everyone else that's talking about these issues.
Great.
Yeah, I'm Justin. I second all the stuff that Reed said about public citizen and Move to Amend. We've been working on that. My own interest, I think, my dad's a political science professor, and so, he told me stories about, 60s politics when I was a little kid, and then just kind of stayed obsessed with newspapers. And then I'm a professor over at LaGuardia Community College, and in my writing classes, I always have the students learn about corporations, and after kind of reading about corporate personhood and these issues and having Citizens United happen while I'm teaching this stuff, I decided, okay, now's the time to do something else. And so I'm just looking forward to encountering new ways to educate people and to, broaden the movement in all kinds of those ways.
My name is Mike Korn, and I just got involved a few months ago with Occupy Wall Street, and I was a big fan in the beginning, and it's kind of like, it's not faded completely. I'm kind of like one foot in the door, 1 foot out, and I'd like to get my feet back in again, but with some kind of alliance. I really think that there's so many things out there, so many issues out there that we do have common cause with, and we need to start making building bridges and stop having these pissing matches. It's like which one's more pure, which one has the right idea. I mean, there really is some way of I'm figuring out what's the not lowest common denominator, but the highest common denominator we all can agree with and work forward. Work toward making the system better. And so I plan to go back to my committee in OWS and hope to hopefully talk to them about what I found out here and how we can make connections and try to connect so we don't it's not duplicative efforts and we're not all over the place. We don't keep reinventing the wheel.
My name is Jeff Goldstein. The way I got here basically is there's an organization, I know you all know MoveOn.org, and I was a member, and Joe Loria was supposed to be here, as you well know. I don't know what happened to him. I heard him, he said he's late, he's very late, he's not here, but anyway. I've been a passionate, proud liberal my entire life, and my father was interested in politics and went to City College, and I was a hippie in the 60s, but I didn't only do drugs, I did politics. I both. Yeah, both, right, only not too heavy on the LSD. All right, let's not get into details about that.
Move on.
That's for another time. But I've been a fighter. I marched on Washington million strong when we had the people, and I was so glad to see Occupy come back. Because a lot of us, I think we were wondering, here we are under Reagan, and here is all this stuff going on for the last 40 years. Our democracy has been slowly eroding or crumbling before our very eyes, and it felt like, helpless. I felt so frustrated. So Occupy came, I got involved with Occupy in various factors, and I'm so glad I came to the meeting. I've always respected Common Cause. They've done a lot of great things recently, and I just wanted, I like the concept of what we're doing here, and go out there and spread the word, because the media, as you all know, if you don't watch Rachel, who very few people in the mass, or all the shows that I love on NBC, and by the way, you should watch Saturday and Sunday. There's a great show, Chris Hayes, and after her, Melissa Harris Perry, but you have to get up early for it. But if you're a liberal and you care, those are two shows you should watch. And I'm just glad to be here, and I hope you all succeed in our goal.
My name is Sam, and I'm the Associate Director here at Common Cause New York. but I'm going to talk more about my experiences as a person on this and why I'm here and why this is so important to me. And I'm not a liberal. I consider myself a moderate and a pragmatist in this. But the problem is that when you're trying to fight for the middle, at least from my perspective these days, you just find yourself becoming more and more radicalized because the centers have been so polarized.
Right.
So that if you're trying to fight for middle ground, you just find that ground becomes smaller and smaller, and you just sort of have to push in the other direction just to kind of balance the scales. In my work, and I've worked as a community organizer in the past, one of the things that guided me was something that was taught to me early on, which is putting your faith into action, right? Which was the motto for Habitat for Humanity, where I worked for many years, and that has always followed me through. You gotta, follow your faith on this. You gotta don't just believe something. Just don't talk about something. Do something. And as I began to see things change, and I began to see that both the progressives, and the conservatives were not talking to each other, but at the same time facing similar issues, and seeing that our democracy was being co-opted by corporate interests, seeing that our political process was becoming more and more obscure, and it was more like a three-card Monte or the shell game, where it was like, look, it's not here, it's here,
Right.
And as I began to see that process evolve, as I began to see that our people, instead of engaging and fighting back, were withdrawing, where I began to see that people were not caring and willing to participate, they just kept on throwing their hands up in the air, I began to get angry about this issue. I began to get really upset about the fact that people were taking advantage of the fact that there wasn't low voter turnout, that people were not engaging our democracy, that we weren't holding power accountable, that we were just sort of letting things be, saying to ourselves, well, this is the way, the crooks will be crooks. This is the way it's always been. So when I had the opportunity to join Common Cause, it was finally this opportunity for me to put all the things that were pissing me off and that I really believed in, and kind of actually get paid to do it, which was awesome, because it was like, wow, you can actually do that. And someone said to me once, that's the dream, right? To do what you love and to do what you feel and to put your faith into action and that. So for me, this is more than just a job. It's a mission. It's a cause. It's putting my faith into action. It's putting my faith into action in the people that are here, because I believe that we as human beings can make a difference. I believe that when a just cause arises, good people do rise up to the occasion, which is what I'm seeing around us, that good, this is a just cause and good people have stepped up to fight this battle with us. So I do feel very strongly that we need to kind of put ideology to the side. We need to just sort of focus on the fact that there is something wrong with our democracy, that this is still a great country, but it needs an overhaul. Every machine needs a tune-up, and this country needs a tune-up. And that tune-up comes by limiting corporate presence in the political process, and then doing that. Whether you're a conservative or you're a liberal, it's time that we fought back and took back what's ours, and took this back from the corporations.
Hi, my name is Dave. I'm Occupy Wall Street. I found out about this at the rally in Central Park. And, I'm here because, I really want to make a difference, I believe in government by the people, for the people, and of the people. And corporations are not people. Only people are people. And, I've just been real frustrated as to, how the Occupy movement is falling apart, and everyone else is just saying, oh, well, this is just how it is, and, either they're not doing anything at all, or they're just yelling, fuck the police, and that's not gonna do a damn thing,
Yeah.
And so I feel that, we gotta, strategize and organize and, do something that is gonna make a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, my name is Calvin James, and I've been a community organizer for many, many years, back from CARU to the Community Board 14, Precinct Council, so many things.
Which Community Board 14?
In Brooklyn. Community Board 14 in Brooklyn.
Cypress Hills, right?
No, that's Midwood,
okay.
Flatbush, yes. The concern that I have is the lack of common sense in government. The loss of the need for people to be involved, replaced with this corporate understanding of the way everybody should live and how every dollar should be spent. And so they send the big guys these big checks, and they decide who's elected. It's crucial for people to come together and begin, like it's like a big ocean liner. It's going to take some time to redirect it, but it's crucial that we begin to redirect this ocean liner in a way that allows intelligent individuals to have a say. There must be a match on this scale between what corporations have to do and say about the political process and what people have to do and say. So I can't help but understand and believe that when people come together, well-meaning, intelligent people, we can make a difference. The political process and its influence by corporations has to be minimized. Our voices have to be heard, and I'm here to join with you and make a change in any way we can.
My name's Aaron Black. I'm an activist and an organizer at Occupy Wall Street. First and foremost, I think it's really great that OWS and Common Cause are here together. The only way we're going to make a difference in this community is if we build coalitions together. Contrary to what many people think, hopefully it's none of you, you don't have to occupy a park to be a part of this movement. Many people did not sleep in that park, and they contributed. And this winter was tough. There were about 30 of us holding the fort down over on 50 Broadway, organizing things and keeping lists together. And wow, May Day's coming up. And I'm hopeful and yet skeptical, because getting people out on the street doesn't really mean anything if you don't have messaging. And clearly this is more than just a social movement. You know, a bunch of us showed up on September 17th because we wanted to be heard, and you know, we were. It was kind of unexpected, the attention that the country, the world paid attention to us. It was, I never imagined that the whole world would be watching the way they were. So, you know, the question is, what do we do with that now? I mean, clearly we've changed the conversation. I'm sure most of you guys watched the State of the Union address. That was our language, right? He was talking our language, and I along with a few other people, started an affinity group. We're dedicated to you know, universal voter registration, because we feel like you know, like a social security number, you should be born with that, and you know, we're interested in getting money out and voters in. I think that's the solution. I think, you know, while Citizens United is an important component, and we really need to get rid of that in the super PACs. You know, things weren't so great 2 years ago. You know, somebody like Bloomberg was able to come in and buy the election back in 2001. What did he spend? $70 million over a 2-week period or something
over
like that?
100 million.
But you know, it's what we need some kind of publicly funded, you know, electoral process, because right now we have no democracy, and when you don't have a democratic system, when capitalism in this country was supposed to be policed by democracy, and as long as we have our elected officials being bribed and blackmailed and bought off by these special interest groups and corporations, Our homes are gonna be underwater. What do we have, like $1 trillion in student debt right now?
No problem,
ch-
borrow from your parents.
There's a job crisis. None of this is gonna get done. This is the #1 problem facing us right now. And I think, you ask a lot of these kids what a super PAC is and they can't tell you. They're simply showing up because they know there's something wrong, they wanna do something about it, but they don't have the know-how. And it's up to us to show them. I think, I know I'm going off on a rant here, but I want to stress how important it is that, we all get together and try to solve this problem. And maybe at the end of the meeting, some of us can get together and talk about doing a teach-in in Union Square on May Day.
Well, we're gonna circle back on that, because we actually have something structured,
Yeah.
so it's part of our plan.
So I'm done with my rant.
My name is Shirley Sachs. In the 50s, I volunteered to work at CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, for those of you who don't remember it. Then I was asked to take a job in the program department, which I did with Norman Hill. And James Farmer was there. But, you know everybody who was involved there. This was before I decided to get a degree in community org at Delphi University, which I did. I went to school late in life. My father was very much of a radical, but he wasn't much of a doer. He talked more than he did, and I picked up the other part. I became the doer. At certain parties that I go to, I'm introduced as Shirley the activist, which I think is very funny. I have a different view of this. This thing that's going on with the Supreme Court has a basis. There's a whole background. For example, they did away with civics. You cannot have a conversation with a 12-year-old about the Constitution because they don't know what it is. The Declaration, they don't know what it is. The world became, when they were born, the world started. There was nothing preceding it, and that was it. There's no way you can have a conversation with someone under 30, and then I'm not even sure about that. So we have to bring back civics. The education system is disgusting. They don't know art. People go to the museums and world tours to come in, mainly German and Japanese. I did my own personal study. Americans don't go to museums. They're charging $20 a head. When I was a kid, used to go to the museum for nothing. They never charged anything. All right, so the background is we have to improve the education system. We should bring back art and music. They should be cultivated. They should know about other civilizations. We're a very stupid population. I would not say, as you said, I don't think we're a great country anymore. We have been on the skids for a very long time, and that's how it started, with the education system. People are not educated. They don't know what the voting system is all about. They don't understand the Supreme Court. I would like to see the Supreme Court changed. I don't think people should have a lifetime job. There are a bunch of idiots sitting there. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. There's one person who never even asked the question. He had no business being there. It's an embarrassment. I mean, I just heard that the Senate is working 41 days out of the year, and I'm sure the Supreme Court is working even less. So that has to change. I think there should be term limits. I don't think people should be sitting there forever. I mean, I remember Frankfurter, I remember other people like that. I mean, they were like almost gods. I mean, the way they wrote up what do you call it? Yes, I mean, it was beautiful to read. It made some sense, it was heartfelt, it was literate. I know every generation says, things are not the same, they were better before. I don't feel that way. There are a lot of things that are wonderful. I love the internet. I love Facebook with all its faults. I cannot have conversations with a lot of people, and so I don't do it. I mean, why aggravate? I went to Occupy Wall Street. I said something about September 7th. And then I couldn't find anything again. You listening?
I'm listening.
And I went
Take
crazy. I
notes.
called up people. I said, "What's going on September 17th?" You know, I thought I was imagining something. And they started it, and a week later I was down there. I contributed 2 yoga mats, which the police now have. They absconded in my yoga mats in perfect condition. But I was glad that I did it. I'm sorry I couldn't contribute more. I thought it was a terrific idea. I don't, but I think instead of just popping in to this problem with all this money coming down and polluting the voting system, I mean, people, it's a very bad time for a lot of people. I know people who will never work again. They're too embarrassed to go on welfare. I don't even know if welfare would let them go on it. I know people who, even if they went to school, would not be employed. It's very, I mean, so you cannot get people like that who have thrown up their hands and say, I give up, you know, to do anything. You have to get people who still have a spark of life left in them, who still feel this. Every revolution is made that way. You cannot have a revolution on the backs of the peasants because they're not going to do anything. They're too tired, they're too hungry, they're too depressed. So that level is out. You will they're not sitting here, I can see that. So that's something to deal with, and you know, even to engage them, they haven't been educated enough. They've dropped out of school. They take the worst jobs in the world. I have a grandson who's now looking for a job. And he'll be lucky if he can get unemployment. I mean, he just hurt his back. I'm looking at something, he's gonna go down the tubes. I just know it, I've seen it before. I mean, I've known people who have jumped out of windows, who have hung themselves, we just had a grandnephew overdose in his dorm. We had great hopes for him. I mean, if I tell people that, they said, oh, what, a middle-class boy, a white boy did this? Found in the dorm, dead, 3-4 days, nobody missed him. They had to knock down the door, finally somebody, and they found him. And we're still mourning him, I can't get over it. So that's what, I mean, things are very bad out there. And this is very hard work, what we're asking people to do now. That's my rant.
I'm Grace Davey, and I've never been an activist before. I teach African history at Queen's College, and I spent a lot of time in South Africa. I write about the anti-apartheid movement, and so I've been very inspired by what people in that movement were able to accomplish. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and my dad was a tax economist who worked for the House of Representatives for the Ways and Means Committee under Dan Rostenkowski.
Great job.
Wow.
Great job.
And he was passionate about closing loopholes on corporations, and he worked really hard on this. But sort of like somebody else said this, you know, he was very frustrated by the fact that he couldn't make the progressive change he wanted to make. And I sort of learned from him. He would come home and tell these stories about these people, and you know, it's a situation in which even very honorable people with good intentions can't do the things they want to do because of the way in which the lobbyists work. And things have only gotten more inequitous since then. So I think that's one reason why I wanted to get involved in Occupy Wall Street. And what I've done is I've been active with Occupy Queens, but not so much lately. And then over the past few months, I was working with a group. I've seen some of you at some of the meetings about the group that planned the Spring Awakening in Central Park a couple weeks ago. So that's something we've been focusing on, and so I'm eager to learn more. I'm happy to be here.
When I was patakied in '95, the deputy commissioners were out, I decided to do something else, which is unimportant. But about 2 years ago, I said, wait a minute, the most important, given what I'm seeing, the most important thing for me is campaign finance reform, money in politics. I've worked with legislators at all levels, including ones in Washington, even though I was with city government and state government. Even this morning, 2 pieces in the op-ed. So if you look at delay in food safety legislation, just because the food industry is blocking it. If you look at the privatization of Gail Collins' article, there isn't a day that goes by. These guys up there, and I've been at meetings where a state senator and 2 other times a state assemblyman have literally said in front of 15 or 20 people, excuse me, but it's about this. You can't come to me and ask my support. I don't see you during my campaigns. I don't see you on my campaign donor rolls, etc. That's just small stuff. What we're seeing in this country is a plutocracy, an oligarchy, call it what you will, but it is a complete erosion of democracy, and no reform can exist in any area, in my opinion, whether it's tax reform, education, you name it, nothing with the way money is controlling politics right now. 70 to 80% of their time is spent on this. The Occupy Wall Street movement was the greatest thing since sliced bread. When I saw that, and I'm up there, I said, my goodness, I've lived long enough to see something like that. I personally was very glad to see there was one segment there where you were occupying legislators' offices and going to Washington, I believe. I said hallelujah, because the corporate sector is about making money. That's their primary objective. So I was not going to reduce that. That's their goal in life, is doing that. But the Occupy, I was hoping would go into that direction and make a big splash. And connecting with data, the amount of money that people are getting, and the nexus between that and the decisions and what they're supporting or not supporting in terms of legislation. I just have a sense of urgency. I'm not going to retire because I'm anytime soon, but because I have a 9-year-old, 37-year-old, and 2 grandkids. The reason why I mention that is that it dawned on me 2 years ago that my 9-year-old and my 2 grandkids are literally the reason why I'm here. Common Cause, because of their laser focus on what I think is the most important issue facing America.
Thank you.
And, well, my name is Marjorie Bello, and I worked for HRA for 20 years.
What
and
is that?
I beg your pardon?
Human resources.
And Calvin,
Yes.
Mr. Deloria recommended that I come here, and I'm just here to maybe report back to him or something.
Deloria is the reason why I'm here. He was affiliated with the Organization of Staff Analysts, where our union, and I too worked for HRA for over 37 years. So glad to meet you over there.
The core message for us is that the country is in crisis, and it's not just by accident. That as long as politicians are accountable to corporations and lobbyists who finance their campaigns, they're not going to be addressing the primary concerns of ordinary people. Because some of the solutions which government would impose might interfere with the bottom line for some corporations. So when you talk about tax loopholes and the difficulty in closing them, you're really getting to, I think, a very essential point which most Americans understand, and certainly New Yorkers understand as well. But as I said previously, we've done a really good job of convincing people that there is a problem. At Common Cause on our website, you will find a lot of reports and studies where we've analyzed campaign contributions from particular industries. Recently, we just released a report where we talk about the campaign contributions from the hedge fund industry. Hedge funders being a new cutting edge in the financial world. 10 years ago, nobody really knew about hedge funds. 10 years ago, they weren't really contributing. Now they're among the largest campaign contributors because they are compensated in the billions of dollars annually. So we have individuals with a huge amount of money, literally money to burn, who can sit down and write $1 million check to put their vision forward of what the education system should be or whatever cause they are planning. And ordinary Americans know that they can't match those dollars. We're seeing this at the federal level with the super PACs, and the question is, what can we do to change it? And we have a Supreme Court which is not sympathetic to the idea, really lives in some fantasy world completely removed from politics as it's actually practiced in our country.
They're not removed from politics at all.
Well, they are in terms of what they're writing about the political system and the role of money in politics. They're taking a right-wing ideological point of view, but what they're actually writing in their decisions is really a fantasy land when a decision comes down that says a outside entity that will spend $1 million or $2 million in negative advertising, supposedly unrelated to the candidate, doesn't corrupt our political system, that's a fantasy. We know that the threat of, if you don't vote the way we want you to vote, we're going to come into your district when your re-election campaign is happening, and we're not going to fund your opponent. We're going to run our own ads saying how bad you are. For whatever reason we make up, we're going to attack you. We're going to find your faults. So you better play ball with us. You better vote the way we want you to vote, or else you're going to be vulnerable. And we're seeing this right now at the state level. We have 4 Republican state senators who stepped away from the Republican conference, and they voted for marriage equality. And several of them are being attacked from their right flank, where there are Tea Partiers who are going to run against these guys on the basis that they voted for marriage equality. And we're now seeing a battle of the bucks, where we're getting people from the right attacking the senators who voted their conscience, and we're seeing people who support marriage equality now putting a lot of money into their re-election campaigns. To say that those independent dollars don't ultimately push our public policy is a fiction. Of course, when you have the threat of an infusion of $500,000 in negative ads, it has an impact on the politician. It has an impact on the elected official. It influences how they vote. If it doesn't ultimately determine their vote, it gives them pause. If you talk to even the most progressive and independent members of Congress or members of the legislature, what you find, and it's really kind of shocking, and ordinary folks don't really understand this, every elected official has a ticker that runs constantly in the back of their minds, even the independent ones. How much did this person give me? Is this a campaign supporter? If I blow off the meeting or tell them I disagree with what they want me to support, are they going to oppose me? Are they not going to write that $1,000 or $5,000 check? Even the good ones. I've had this conversation with some amazing members of Congress who've been there for a long time, whom I respect and who have really offered some great legislation, and they say, of course it's a factor. You would have to be stupid not for it to be a factor. Now, they tell me, and I've seen it, they overcome it. But it's a constant little voice. How much money? Does this person give me money? How much should I listen to them? I've also heard from members of the legislature when they come in and they get their messages, right? The phone messages that come in on the slips of paper, you know what they do with them? They go through and they immediately arrange them in the order of the size of the donation of the person. So if you've written a $5,000 check, or you're a lobbyist who commands the ability to write a $5,000 or a $10,000 check, you get your phone call returned fast. If you're just an ordinary constituent who hasn't contributed, you're in the bottom of the stack. It's human nature. This is the system that we allow to continue, okay? Because ultimately we have some responsibility too. If we don't like the system, if we see what it does to good people, and most people who run for office, they run from the impetus of, I want to make a difference, I want to do something good for my family, friends, and neighbors. I want to engage in public service. And it's once they get up there and they get on to what I call the fundraising hamster wheel, that they get corrupted. It's a lousy system, and it doesn't exist in a vacuum. We need to be clearer about how it functions. Most people don't understand every elected official spends hours every day raising money. It's always in the back of their minds. It's never not discussed. And when they get together, they're talking about, how's your fundraising going? Members of Congress are expected to raise somewhere between $15,000 to $30,000 a day. Okay? And it's a higher amount if you're a state senator. or a US senator. It's a higher amount if you're a statewide official. During campaigns, a significant amount of time is spent raising money, either in fundraisers face-to-face and often what we call dialing for dollars. And one of the first questions we need to ask people is, what do you think your elected officials are spending their time doing? And they're gonna tell you, oh, not working for me. And it's true, because they're working to raise the money they need to get reelected. And we let that happen, right? Because we don't give them an alternative, except in some places. We do have alternatives. We have public funding of elections in various states and in various cities. And it can work to do what we want. And what is it we really want out of our election system? What would you like to see? What would you consider to be the kind of adjustments we would need? What should be emphasized in elections?
I'd like to see better people run.
Okay, that's number one. What else would you like to see changed about our
$1 trillion
elections?
in student debt.
What else would you like to see?
No, I want them to represent us again.
We want them to be responsive, right?
Start
Right.
focusing on the issues.
Focus on the issues, exactly.
A clear path for give and take, not just to feel that corporate entities have the buy-in,
Right.
some way that they can hear from people, organizations like
Right,
this.
a
and others.
focus on small people,
Right.
not the big
And hearing what they
corporations.
have to say.
But also making them debate, actually.
Right.
You know,
Okay,
instead of
okay.
just, I mean, money is one equation, but how about actually saying, whatever district they're in, high school auditoriums, wherever, you know what I mean? Start making them say, it's a requirement, or, like the Lincoln Douglas debates, let's bring it back to that again, that
So-
kind of
Or
level.
if they even do it in Congress.
Right, so what I'm hearing is
And
that
get
we
rid of all these misleading campaign ads that just attack the politicians, Just
Right.
get rid of that.
Right, so what I'm hearing from you is that we want an election system that's focused on constituents, it's focused on ordinary people, it's focused on issues, and it is addressing the concerns of the people who are supposed to be represented. Aaron?
I mean, pointing the finger at politicians for raising money isn't gonna get the job done. It's an uneven playing field. It's a systemic problem, and, we should be
Yeah.
focusing on the system.
That's right, that's exactly right. It's the system that's corrupt, not in most instances the individual politician. We have to change the system. So we've been talking about some very specific things.
Yeah, I have to, you mind if I interject on that point?
Please.
Just for my own edification, I'm not sure. How would one change the system without getting legislation and therefore?
Well, this is really what we're talking about.
We've been talking about this issue for 40 years, since Buckley Vallejo. And that, simply talking about it isn't gonna get the job
Right.
done. We need to take it to the streets. And simply screaming on a street corner isn't gonna work either. We need to engage the power structure as well. It's a two-pronged effort. That's how
Well,
we get the job
we
done.
are talking specifically about legislative changes, and we're talking about constitutional changes, ultimately.
But we
It's
need
multi-pronged.
boots on the street, and we need our think tanks, and we need our people to be out on the street. And
We need to do everything. We need to be out on the streets. We need to talk to people who are sleeping in the park, We need to also go on YouTube about this, blog about this. We need to do everything.
And we need to convince the public there is an alternative so that there's political pressure on the legislatures, because here in New York, unlike California or other places, we don't have citizen initiatives. But public financing of elections, and there are different varieties of public financing that I want to talk to you about. Public financing of elections, where it's been adopted, and it's been adopted by legislatures, and it's been adopted by initiative processes, where we have it, the things that it does are very much what we've been talking about. Is it an absolute panacea? Is it overnight going to fix everything that is wrong with our system? No. Is it going to completely get money out of politics? No. What it's going to do is it's going to provide a counterweight to this infusion of public money, and it refocuses our election campaigns on small donations and on constituents. And it helps the candidates not spend all their time in little rooms dialing for dollars, but allows them to talk to real people to get them to invest in the campaign. And when you have to talk to your constituents, then you've got to talk issues. You've got to talk about what they care about.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about this further, but just to be clear, we're talking about an immediate action, right? Which is campaign finance reform. That's the immediate. We do have a long-term goal, which is an amendment to the Constitution, to overturn Citizens United. That's where but to get there, we need to take this immediate action step, right?
And the first step is we need to convince people that this corrupt system doesn't have to be this way.
Exactly.
There's an alternative. And we have examples of where it's working. Is it perfect? No. But do we see tangible changes? Yes, we do. And New York City is actually a really interesting model to talk about because we've got public financing here. Does that mean we don't have corrupt politicians? No, unfortunately, there are bad apples. There are, people who will take advantage of any system. But just because people rob banks doesn't mean we do away with banks because that's where the money is. We see a real benefit to public financing here in New York. For those of you who've been involved, think about the face of our city council 20 years ago versus the face of our city council now. One thing that's happened is that the council has diversified tremendously as a major impact of public financing. And we see that in every single place where you introduce a strong public financing system. We saw it in Arizona when they adopted a full public financing system, a clean money system in 2000. We saw that in Connecticut when they adopted a matching fund system in 2008. We saw that here in New York City when the New York City system went to a 4-to-1 match about 10 years ago. The first thing that happens is we open up the ballot. We open up the ballot to people who are willing to challenge incumbents. We open up the ballot to more ordinary citizens, community activists like yourselves, who previously have thought, oh my God, in order to run, do you know what the sort of the baseline is? If you want to run for the assembly, what a political consultant will tell you, if you want to run for the New York Assembly, somebody want to give me a guess as to what figure you need to start with? It's actually $500,000. You have to be able to raise $500,000. I've been in conversations where community activists have said, I really thought about it, and I could raise $300,000. I know I could do that. And the consultant has said, you're not a strong candidate. Think of yourselves and the causes we've all been associated with and what it takes to raise $300,000 from friends and family and neighbors, and that's not enough.
Does it cost a certain amount of money to get onto the ballot when you're running for president?
Well, you have
I think you have to pay to get onto the ballot.
There are different processes in different states. But, the truth of the matter is the first thing that a good public funding system does is it opens up the ballot. It encourages people like ourselves who have thought, I could run for office, and then they say, I'm not going to be able to raise $500,000, and that's the end of the conversation. You get challengers, and you get many, many more people running for open seats, which is what we see here in New York.
But the system was introduced by legislation in the city council.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so my
That's
point
correct.
was that, my point is that the focus, in other words, if this process, there's gonna be lots of things to get this done. A map, you have Occupy Wall Street, Common Cause, increasing
Right.
public awareness, the pizza that's gonna be in my house tonight, talking about this. But ultimately, it does lead to something like legislation.
Absolutely.
Which means if, for me, in my district, Congressman Ackerman is going out, but I could say to, people and drum up in this, public awareness thing and where I live, do you know if Congressman Ackerman would approve a piece of legislation, blah,
right.
blah, 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 or a piece of counsel? And that becomes the measure on which an increasing number of people look at him. On the national level, immediately when I started learning about Common Cause, which was first at the national level, I saw, the Fair Election Now Act.
Right.
Kirsten Gillibrand, the signer. Where's Chuck Schumer? and I don't know where he is this
Yeah.
year because it wasn't introduced last year. But immediately that becomes a negative for me. I like Chuck, but when I saw that his signature wasn't on there, I had a problem with that. So everything leads to the legislation or whatever other
Right,
method
and
of changing.
ultimately, down the line,
and
we
to change to the
not
system.
only need to change the
Right.
Citizens United decision, we need to change the Constitution so it cannot be misinterpreted in the future.
Right.
So what we see is the support for legislation like the Fair Elections Now Act in Congress or the Fair Elections bill that's been introduced in the state legislature as a galvanizing force to allow us to have conversations, to have tangible victories, to do what we can to fix our flawed system with the tools that we currently have available, and to elect better people, and to look towards amending the Constitution so it is clear that money is not speech, corporations are not people, and our legislatures can regulate campaign spending. The other thing which public funding does is it allows a refocus on small constituent donations. Huge increase in the number of small checks coming from constituents, participation by the actual voter. Because in New York City, when you give a $10 check, it's worth $70 to the elected. So if you give a $100 check, it's worth $700. And all of a sudden, you're paying in the same money league with the big boys. And that's the public money. A phrase that really has stuck with me, and it's one of those things you use when you're talking to somebody who's got a very negative attitude. Oh, they just get bought off. The politicians, they're just getting purchased by the corporations. The response to that is something that a very smart columnist in Los Angeles wrote several years ago, and that is there are going to be campaign contributions. Somebody's got to pay for the campaigns, and if the voters don't pay, the corporations will.
Susan, I'm going to play devil's and ask a question. So if our goal is to get a constitutional amendment in the long term, and this is the immediate action step, can you tell me, how does this connect, right? Why are we working in this manner? Why don't we just speak to Chuck Schumer or others to legislate a constitutional amendment? Why don't we just do it? Why are we taking this kind of longer step as opposed to just sort of talking to our elected officials to get this change done?
We're doing them both simultaneously. We are working on the short-term solution because frankly, we don't have enough legislators who are open to amending the Constitution because they're under the corporate thumb. They are very much beholden to their campaign contributors. And if we're not switching the focus and enabling more community-based people to have a fair shot at getting elected, we're pushing our boulder, and it's a boulder, getting a constitutional amendment up. We're pushing that boulder up a very, very steep hill. And we need to change public opinion. We need to galvanize it. A legislation that's local is a great organizing tool, and there's no reason why we don't talk about both simultaneously. We need to fix the system as fast as we can because it's a complete corruption right now while we work on the longer term fix, which is the amendment. And we find sympathetic people. We get them signed up, and we sign them up for both efforts.
Is it possible for the media to come down in their price or donate a certain amount of airtime to both sides?
Is it possible?
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely, it's possible. How likely do you think it is? One of the things that we have built into the Fair Elections Now Act at the federal level was that some of the funding for this would come from broadcast fees. You can imagine how the broadcasters screamed about that. They're very similar to our current governor. They're for transparency and accountability for everybody else.
Yeah, but not.
But not for themselves. If you have been following the current controversy at the federal level with the Federal Elections Commission as to whether broadcasters should be required to make their lists of political ads publicly available on the internet, you can see how they are all about everybody else should provide them with information and they should be behind the curtain. So yes, and one of the things that we need to do with a change in how we finance our elections is to get more community-based people into office so that when we start to talk about revising our communications policy so that you have a fairness doctrine again, so that you have some requirements in terms of what ads are carried and how, then we have people who are willing, who see that there's a need for that. Right now, we have folks who are legislating at the behest of corporations, and one of the largest lobbies and most effective lobbies, because after all, not only do they have money, they have TV time, are the broadcast industry. And they get almost everything they want out of Congress because they have money and a rifle. It's a big stick that they have. So we've got to help elected officials stand up to the onslaught of corporations to think about a constitutional amendment, to think about the kind of policies that do what we want. And we do that by providing them with public money so they aren't beholden to the corporations. If we're not taking that first step, we're making our job much, much harder, it seems to me. Grace?
Sorry, but I also
Can
want to
we-
bring this back a little bit too, to the fact that, and I just want to say this before we drift off, that the reason we are all here is because we need to be where the tire meets the road, right? So a lot of this education, we need to start taking this back, and I'm going to keep on pushing this point. I mean, maybe not Vicky, but everybody else, get word out there, and we're hoping that you can take this information because you can see the importance of what we're talking about, right? That we serve, the function of the people in this room is very much at that point, where we work on the fair elections piece, but we also stick around and work towards this constitutional amendment. So we need to commit here in this room
But we can
towards
put
the
it
long
on
haul.
Twitter, right in.
Sorry?
I can put it on Twitter in 1 hour.
Absolutely.
And
or
we
you can
do
put it on your
that.
blog.
We use
And that's
all
the
the
way to be an
modalities.
activist.
Right. Sorry, now
I'm
back
not,
to Chris.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, and maybe we're going to get into it in the next piece on engaging an audience. But I think my sense is that there's people in Occupy Wall Street who would say that they are doing what you're describing. They are creating a culture in which people are gonna, the public is more likely to hold elected leaders
Right.
accountable. They're disrupting the status quo. They're exposing that there's a problem. And I guess the question I have is, you know, how would, let's say you want to get people on board with fair elections. I think it seems like the meeting place would be a physical location
Right.
where the money is corrupting politics, and it's obvious to everyone. So that then at that physical location, you could have a flash mob where people suddenly emerge singing and they lie down in the streets. I mean, this is a movement with an incredible opportunity right now. People are willing to get arrested. People are willing to go to jail, and that does not happen every fall and every winter and every spring. So to take advantage of that, because that does move things forward. How can, for people, if people are not necessarily so interested or inspired by these talking points, I'm inspired, but there might be occupied people who like,
Well, this is
that's
not gonna
not what,
work for
so how
everyone.
do you get,
Well,
how do you break the
how
bridge?
do-
Let me answer this.
Wait, does Aaron, is this directly
Does that make sense?
responsive? You've got 30
Messaging.
seconds.
Messaging. Campaign finance reform sounds so bland, but you tell these kids corporate personhood. Ooh, what's that? Corporations are people too? Oh, that fucking sucks. Excuse me. I want to go get arrested for that. You know, a lot of these guys, they learn when they're doing the action. And I think messaging is so key. If we could simplify it and make it easy to understand, because campaign finance reform, it's complicated. You know, it's, you know, all these little issues. You can't learn that in an afternoon.
Right.
If there's a way to simplify this messaging and get it out there.
Okay, so people are willing to get arrested for this movement, right? But they got to know why they're getting arrested, right? They're going to be people who are going to want to know, why am I getting arrested? Why am I doing this? And that's what we're hoping to get out there, right? We're trying to get the facts out so people clearly understand.
So when you do
what
an
happened.
action outside David Koch's office,
And we have.
and you have,
And we'll do it
the
again.
next one, okay?
Or Mr.
Or
1%.
when we're doing an action outside of Verizon headquarters, we're talking about the way in which they use our money, because that's how they make their money, from products they sell us. They're using our money to buy politicians. We need to provide an alternative. So the politicians work for us, and that's fair elections.
So So a way of like connecting OWS with Common Cause or any other organizations.
We're already connected.
Well,
Yeah, but in terms of messaging.
More strategically.
Yeah.
All right. If there's going to be a bill going out at any particular time, that we know it's going to be the most pertinent time to get a hold of these people's ears because it's going to be in Congress or the State House right now. That's when you get the mob together and you get out there and make do a
That's
protest.
right.
Not any old time.
People feel hopeless. When you
Yes,
talk
right.
about this, their first reaction is they're brainwashed from the media and everything and distortion. It's so, like you said in the beginning, it's forget about it. How can you? So you give them examples, as was said, about success stories, and there
Not
are
gonna
success
fix everything,
stories
but
out
it
there.
makes a difference.
There are
It
success
starts to
stories.
get us people we can work with.
One
I know.
important point of information. Being angry is okay. It's healthy, and being angry doesn't mean you have to get arrested. You can be out in the streets. You can make a lot of noise. It doesn't mean you have to get arrested.
Work
Right.
smart, not hard. I mean, we need to be smart about this.
Exactly. I just want to bring it back to point. This is why we're all here. We're here because we want to be this voice of hope. We want to build this public awareness so that we can help people direct their frustrations in a way that's educated, creative, and mobilizing. So that being said, I think in the essence of time right now, I feel we're all very inspired, but I think maybe we could talk about some immediate actions that we can take back home with us.
What do we do next?
Exactly. If you want to become a Common Cause activist, just check the volunteer. I'll get back in touch with you so we can have another meeting to discuss where we go from here.
Let me jump in on that one. So what we're asking is the following, and so before you leave, there's a sign out sheet. We're doing the opposite of sign in. The last box will say volunteer. What we plan to do is, if you leave your email, we will follow up with a doodle, which will allow you to check in, and then we'll set up a time to do a more in-depth kind of training, and then schedule you with a partner to go out to Union Square or to one Federal Hall, or another location with a partner. So we want to do this
Or
as teams.
as a team in the
Exactly.
crowd at a demonstration
Right.
with material and with a way to engage people in a positive
signs.
discussion and signs.
Exactly. And we can, well, what can we do as soon as we leave to start maybe feeling like there is an action that
Well,
we
what
can
is,
Well,
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that we need to do is we need people to communicate with Governor Cuomo, who has been waffling, okay? He made a strong statement in the State of the State, then he went quiet on this topic. Then a whole bunch of organizations got together, and in the last 2 weeks, we have been throwing everything we can at him. Press events and articles and editorials and letters and all kinds of things. And he started, yet again, he made a good statement, and then he started to, well, maybe it won't happen this year. We need this guy to know
Write
that
a
people
letter to the
care.
editor at the time
This is the
to
fair
embarrass him.
This is fair elections,
May
that
not
we
have the
need
law.
a Fair Elections Act, and we need it here in New York State, we need
Yes.
it now. And we need him to be a leader, just the way in which he pushed marriage equality, we need him to push
Or else we
fair
won't vote
elections.
for him for
Or
president.
else we, there you go, there you go, that is the
He's not
first
gonna
and
have
most
a
immediate thing, is to write him or to call. And let him know, I'm a strong supporter, and I expect you to be a leader on this.
And I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna add to that, not just you call, but get 4 of your friends to call too. Get 4 of your friends to call the governor's office and let him know to support this particular piece of legislation and to support fair elections.
Do you have a number of
Um,
the legislation?
You can get that.
Yeah, is there a
It's
specific piece of
A-
legislation?
9885, I believe.
Oh, so it's actually
And,
good.
and showing up to the governor's office with a couple hundred people is
Also helps, there's an office,
Very
on Third
Especially
Avenue.
if you have a creative action, like one of the things that we did a couple of weeks, actually we did a couple of things. We're nonpartisan, but we've been bird dogging Romney a little bit. I mean, a lot in different cities. We've been holding up Mr. 1% signs. You know, a few hundred of us at each location that he does a fundraiser. And we're not saying vote for him or don't vote for him. What we're talking about here is the guy said corporations are people too, and he represents the ideals of the 1%. And you know, we could do the same thing with the governor.
Right. So the idea here is that we want to let the governor know that we want fair elections, and this is not something that's really negotiable. We don't want him to kind of, you know, play that game of like, well, I passed it, but I'm going to let the Senate kill it. You know what I mean? We need to make sure this passes. This is the first time in a very long time where we have a real chance of getting this passed, and we can't let this window of opportunity pass. Frank, I'm sure you know that, like, once this legislation, if it gets killed now, we ain't going to see it for a long time. So the legislation was introduced last week, last Wednesday, Tuesday, I believe. So it's A9885, if I remember correctly. So, well, the phone number, I don't have it in front of me, but I can get it to you in a few minutes. What I would say is that you want to call the governor's office, let him know this. The timeline would be, I think, for like May, like late May, is I think when it's going to come up for a vote.
Also, everything has to be done between
Well, the sessions end in June.
So for the 2-week window.
Let me jump in here, and first of all, I want to kind of reinforce something you just said, which is extremely important. The Tea Party cares about this issue too. Okay, communities of faith care about this issue too. It's not a progressive issue. It's not a liberal issue. It is an American issue. Okay, you're going to find that Staten Island libertarians out in New Dorp care just as much about this as we do. Okay, that the American people get that there's something wrong, that the GOP and get that there's something wrong. It's the leadership that has a vested interest in not changing this that is kind of part of the problem. We are nonpartisan in this issue because, again, we see the strength that communities of faith care about this, that libertarians care about this, that the Tea Party cares about this. And the Tea Party, to a great extent, came about
By
that
the way,
now.
Sam,
For the
if I may,
actions,
just a
sure.
second, to reinforce that, NPR interviewed 4, I don't know whether it was Brian Lehrer or somebody else, Lopate, interviewed 4 new Tea Party members of Congress. They all lamented the fact that the day after, first of all, the amount of time that they had to spend and are supposed to spend on fundraising, that it's no longer fun. I didn't think I thought I came here to do the right thing, to fight for my causes, but all they're telling me to do is raise money because I have so just to reinforce that they want to also spend their time reading and doing the right thing with regard to legislation.
So let's circle back now to action steps. So the first thing that we're doing is asking you to make the calls and to get 4 friends or more to call the governor's office and let them know that you support, fair elections. Tweet about it, Facebook it, but also, again, and this is the thing, we're going to be sending out an email and we're going to be following up with you directly, and I will give everyone here my card for those of you who don't know how to reach me to follow up with me directly. But the trick is to schedule a time or to schedule up teams so that we can make a physical presence in New York, in Union Square, in other areas, because part of the thinking here is that we need to take this out of the ideological, out of the area of ideas, and into human faces. You being in the park, Michael, talking about this issue, it's going to be more to me than a flyer that you give me at a rally. And that's what we're aiming for here. We're aiming for the human experience in this process too. So while tweeting and Facebook are extremely effective, and I encourage everyone to do that, and we do it ourselves, I'm also asking that we start thinking about ways that we can add the human face to this, which is the teach-ins. I keep on being told by Susan, stay away from teach-ins. It sounds too 60s. But it's the best way to go,
But so I'm going to pass around the clipboard. If you could please give me your name, email, or whatever preferable way that you would like us to contact you. And if you do want to be an activist and be in the park and be that presence, please check the volunteering box, okay?
Point of information, these kids at OWS like the term teach-in. They're eager, they want to learn. And you know what? We have a couple of Twitter accounts. One has...
How many followers do you have on your Twitter?
Well, we have one with 150,000 followers. We have another with 110,000. We've got another with 75,000. We've got a Facebook page with about 200,000. And you know what? We could, as a collective group, create a Facebook page, and everybody could be a monitor, and moderator, I mean, and
we can do that.
And yeah, you know,
And have a discussion.
just as-
But again, I just really want to reinforce this part that it's, while the social media component, getting word out there is important and essential to this, it's the human experience that we're aiming for here. It's because we need to start connect, as an organizer, I can tell you time and time again, handing out a flyer is never gonna be as effective as the in-person door knock, as the handshake, as the conversation on the street. And that's kind of where I'm hoping we can go, because for me, again, I'm thinking along this, that democracy works best when you know that everybody's in this together and you're able to connect with the individuals and bridge that gap.
The reason why we recommend phone calls or letters is every elected official prioritizes communications that they receive from constituents based on the amount of effort that the person has to put in to communicate. So what that means is, while an email or a signature on an internet petition has some impact, it does not have nearly as much impact as a letter that's either handwritten or typed by a person and signed and sent in by mail or fax.
Can Allison please say something? She hasn't said much the whole time.
I have a question. Oh, can you tell us more specifically what's in this bill with regard to, well, there's more aspects of it. Can you tell us?
Yes, what it does is it
Same as the
sets,
other one?
Yes.
is it sets up a public funding system for New York State that is similar to the matching fund system in New York City. It would set up a strong enforcement system, and it would set up lower contribution limits. We're working with the speaker because right now we think it's got some very good things in it, but the lower contribution limits and the enforcement are only directed to people who take public money. It's gotta be for everybody. So that's why this says this bill is a good start. The main thing is that the governor hears that there are real people out there who believe that it's essential for him to make good on his promise of fair elections.
So, I mean, the message then really should just be support this bill, but it doesn't go far enough because what is it?
Well, I mean, that's why I think what we need to say is, it's a good start. We need something tangible. Governor, we need you to push fair elections. That's really the
Drag
message.
Gene Skelos into the room as well.
Correct, that's correct. This is Skelos' bill. We need the governor to drag him into the room to pass it, to make it as strong as it can be. It's the governor, you know, he thinks a lot of himself. And, you know, we need him to be a strong, a message of, we need you to show your leadership,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Is a message that resonates with this guy.
And
We
it would
need
be
you to be a leader.
historic.
That's right,
He
a
loves that
historic
word, you know.
change, right?
Yeah, hopefully
If he
he does.
could pass something that everybody says the legislature won't do, if the governor can make this happen.
One more thing, I was just gonna say that, I mean, in the spirit of strategy, of using strategy with OWS, we're in New York City here, right?
Right.
Cuomo has an office on what, 3rd Avenue, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's like, why don't we target that and make, you know, a big stink and get out there? Why don't we, you know, Common Cause and faith-based organizations, get all these folks together and let's get over there. When we know that the vote is coming close, why don't we
Yeah.
start making the calls now and have a march over there? Let's get that done. I mean, you know, at least about a week before, so at least it'll sink into his head that, you know, the people mean business.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
that would be a real good way of doing it, especially with OWS.
We can talk about ways that we can do that, maybe like a vigil or something like that, something that's, you know, I mean, we should say that, I mean, just to say that Common Cause is not, I mean, even though we love working with, we're not a boots in the ground organization per se, in the sense that we don't do protest and direct action in that manner. That's not to say that we haven't or we
On
won't in
some
the future,
places, yeah.
on some cases, but I would say that, again, I'm just thinking strategically, how much bang can we get for our buck on this? The phone calls and that sort of thing is gonna get us more bang for our buck.
When's the vote?
We left out.
I'm not sure about that.
We left out one very, very important component, the unions. You know, and
There's
some,
strong union support
yeah,
for
there's
this.
strong with TWU, CWA,
Yeah.
SEIU.
We're working with all of them in coalition.
And we are, and you know what, this is a coalition right here.
Yeah.
You know, let the think tank be the think tank. Let the people who are boots on the ground be boots on the ground, but let's coordinate together and let's make this work.
I have a question and a comment.
Yes. And you are?
I'm Joe Loria.
Hi, Joe.
And I'm with Organization of Staff Analysts Retirement Club Civic Action Group, which is newly started, which Calvin James is, and the woman who left is.
Good turnout.
And
We're working on it.
and we're starting up, we're taking on hydrofracking. I'm also with MoveOn.org, I'm the Youth Council coordinator, one of the coordinators. And we believe in action.
Can we bring the attention back over here, please?
One focus, please.
So first of all, I mean, I see it very clearly that we're going to get, we had the movie Gasland. I diverged for a minute for the Retirees Club. But we managed to convince the union it should be shown to the full membership, which is going to happen May 17th. So the full, it's a small union, but nevertheless it's a municipal union. But we're going to expose a lot more people to the issue and get more volunteers. Well, this is the same thing. I mean, we can, I'm sure we can notify all the union members about this and get them to back, whoever will back it, which would be a vast majority.
Right.
The other question I have is, do you know how the legislators break down on this in terms of for or against the Assembly and the Senate?
Yes, we have specific targets.
So
for those who want to get into that kind of detail, that's a conversation that we should have offline, because it's not a
So the Assembly
conversation.
basically is for it, right?
Well, there's some weak spots there, surprisingly, so.
No, you're talking about something different, sorry.
Yeah.
Because this is what's happening with hydrofracking.
Yeah,
you know, the
yeah, so we
Senate
can
is
talk about that offline.
But we're willing to work with you, and as in addition to being a volunteer, but organizationally.
Great, great.
Maybe down the line, what I would like to suggest that we throw into the hopper, changing the electoral system, because then maybe you wouldn't have to spend so much money if it was done by popular votes. You wouldn't have to go state by state by state.
That is actually one of our issues.
Right, national popular vote.
Yeah, national popular vote, exactly.
That's something we can talk to you about. But I think, you know, right. So, you know, one of the things that I'd like people, in addition to, you know, thinking about how you would like to be involved, one of the things that we had hoped to do, and 2 hours is a collapsed time frame, a little homework for those of you who are interested in being part of an activist team of engaging people in conversations. An email that you're willing to share and that we can share with others, your most frustrating experience of either at Thanksgiving or some gathering where you were talking to somebody who was either taking a very anti-campaign finance position, or, you know, I think the Supreme Court's doing a good job, or, you know, this system's not fixable, right? What was the argument that you felt you couldn't really counter? And let's start to talk about some of the specific things that you can say to help persuade other people. Let's start with your immediate circle, right? Because we've all had that experience of somebody who's like foaming on, you know, at Thanksgiving or some other gathering from a far right point of view, and you don't want to make a fuss about it, but you can't just sit there silently while this is going on, and you realize that heads are starting to shake for this not good position and starting to nod, and you're kind of flat-footed and you're not sure exactly what can you say, what's persuasive in that situation. So let's start sharing those frustrating experiences, and let us, as people who've spent a lot of time talking about these issues, let us suggest openings, gambits, responses that you can use when you go out to be an advocate, as we are asking you to be, with your immediate family and friends. We may not persuade that person, but there are all of the other people in the room who need to hear a strong counter that makes them think. Because we're not going to persuade that person who's, you know, your uncle in the Tea Party. It's not going to change his point of view. But the cousins, they might need to hear something that makes sense that's other than that radical point of view.
Great. I wanna, I'm sorry, again,